Hi, Alessandro. Nice to meet
Ciao.
you. It's been a long day already for you.
So it's a long day, yes. Now probably I have a couple of hours to sleep. So I leave the floor to you and say hello to Ilpo,
All right.
dear friend, and ciao.
Ciao. Hello.
Hi.
Hello, Ilpo. Nice to meet you again.
And nice to meet you again. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you?
I can, yes.
Good. So I'm starting my first conversation. Some other of my colleagues have started in the beginning of the day. So I'm just introducing myself. I'm Silvia Ferraris. I'm an associate professor in industrial design at the Dipartimento of Design and School of Design. And I'm also the rector delegate for the international relationship of the School of Design. And I'm very happy to welcome Ilpo Koskinen to our conversation, professor at the South Wales University and a specialist in design research, very important scholar in our field for those who are interested in design research studies. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
So we met in February, right? You were here in Italy?
Yes.
Just before the lockdown for us.
Yes.
And after that week of the PhD festival, for us, everything changed.
Yes, I
saw that. You? What happened to you?
Oh, I flew out from Milan on Saturday morning after the festival. And when I landed in Sydney on Sunday evening, I saw the news. And on Monday, I started to see what's happening in Milan, and it's going towards lockdown. So I left at the last possible minute, I think.
Yes.
Caused some problems here. I was supposed to run a couple of workshops and several meetings here, but basically people, of course, refused to come to those meetings because they thought that I must be ill.
Oh, yes. You were coming from an unfortunate destination.
Oh, you were so unlucky.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah. I had a couple of other colleagues as well who were on holidays in Europe. One who came from Geneva in Switzerland, and he had to go through the same treatment. So we just basically had to self-quarantine ourselves for a couple of weeks.
So later on, I know from my students in exchange that you've been through the same kind of issues that we have, because you also had to close your activities, right? And
absolutely.
And start a new way of doing everything.
Oh, absolutely. In March, late March, the whole university basically went online. And the term was on, of course, so it took a couple of weeks to transfer everything online. And thank God I wasn't teaching, but those colleagues of mine who were teaching basically spent the evenings and the nights doing online content and instructions. It was especially hard in fields like design, where the workshops are so crucially important.
Yes, and being together and is as part of the experience, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And learning from others, and there are so many things you can't really learn through words.
Yes. Well, I think in a way we have been designers ourselves of new ways of doing things, right?
Yes.
Each of us, maybe not all of us, are keen to new technologies, but in a way we had to.
Yes.
More or less try new things. And what we are all discussing now is what have you learned and what are we bringing in the future of this experience? What do you think?
Oh, I think lots of things. The transition was surprisingly smooth. It looks to me that the biggest problem in this online transition and the new way of doing teaching is that it's very hard to make sure that students actually participate in teamwork. It's so easy to turn on your computer and then go to prepare coffee and do something else. And so that seems to be the biggest problem at the moment, but we are learning fast how to do that. And of course, especially when you're teaching undergraduate students, the answer is usually assessments and assessment structures. So we are adjusting those as we go.
Mm-hmm.
But the change as such has been really interesting because in many ways we had to do now something we've been talking for the last 15 years, going more online, flipping the classrooms and putting more content to books, online platforms and so on, and then sparing the time for workshops. And of course, in a couple of months, when our new term starts, we can start to teach in workshops again, most likely, unless we are unlucky again and we get a cluster of cases somewhere in Sydney.
Actually, we are getting ready to do something that will be 50-50, partially at home and partially in school, to guarantee the distance between students in case it's still necessary. So we have a new challenge because, you know, everything online was new. And this 50-50 with students entering slowly, you know, with a check of temperature, it's going to be another challenge for us.
Absolutely. And then at here, at least in particular, the term starts next term starts in September. The biggest question is that we will have lots of students who are unable to come to the country, still mostly from Asian countries, India and China, of course, mostly. So how are we going to make sure that their learning experience is more or less similar to those students who are here? So of course, if you can work face-to-face teams, for instance, and you can go to listen to lectures, the learning experience is different from what it is if you're completely online. And we have to make sure that we keep the students at the same level and give them the same opportunities. And that can be hard.
Yes, we are thinking about that too, because we have, especially at master level, quite an international number of students with the same issue. Maybe they could come, but they don't have time for the visa, just for instance. And so the challenge will be to be in class doing a lecture that somebody's listening from the camera and the computer. Someone is in the class. Then we will make groups, teams, I hope. And then we will have students here and students somewhere else. And we don't want them to feel apart, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
That's what we have to figure out. But yeah. What I've seen, because I've been teaching this semester and I had a first year of bachelor, so usually it's challenging by itself already. Mm-hmm. And but the students were very willing to participate and to adapt and very flexible, and that really helped, you know. We had a lot of worries, but it seems for them they knew how to deal with it, maybe better than us. Maybe because they are digitally born, I don't know.
Oh, absolutely. It was the same experience here. And of course, going online in teaching wasn't particularly difficult after all. It was more like, okay, we have to do it. We have to do it now. Sorry, there's a delivery coming. So we had to do it, and then we basically just did it. And then, of course, the university has good resources for going online. So it took a while to find the best platforms, and we are still experimenting. Mm-hmm. Most of the universities seem to go to Microsoft Teams, which is fairly good for lots of things, but it's not really a learning environment, and its interface is not the best possible. Then again, our courses are really big. So, for instance, in September, I started to teach 2 courses. One will have about 400 students, the other one about 900. And for example, Blackboard can't cope with those numbers.
I know. Yes. So in the end, we will be experts of new ways of teaching, hopefully.
Absolutely. And, I would also say finally.
Yes. I do miss the fact that I ask the students to make mock-ups and models, very rough at the beginning, that becomes better and better in the semester. And this time they had to do it at home with what was available. So they have to be creative, you know, in the other way, you know, but still design, maybe it's still design.
Oh, absolutely. We are going to see that on the 3rd week of September. The incoming students, first-year students, are going to go to their first design. And this is engineering design, but the design class anyway. And one of the first tasks is what we call impromptu design. So the students will get some cheap materials. They get a task. They have to build something in 1 hour. for example, a mock-up of a water tower, and then they have to do a little bit of mathematics. They have to build something, and then we are going to test whether their water bottles drop down or not.
Okay.
Okay, good. Now we have to do it online, and it probably means that we have to give students like an indicative budget of €3 or €4. Don't use more for the materials, and then we have to find a way to organize the impromptu design so that students can actually learn a little bit about how to solve a technical problem very quickly under ridiculous time pressure.
Yes, we had the challenge was that during the most strict lockdown, it was also not possible to go and buy materials. So they had to use garbage basically and things at home. So yes, very creative. So in this conversation, we ask our guests to suggest a word, something that came from you in this time, and you suggested intelligence.
Yes. And
what did you think this meant in this occasion?
It's the kind of a thing that we've been discussing a lot over the last, especially in the Nordic countries. We discussed quite a bit already, slightly over 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when there were more and more digital technologies coming to design, and design became more and more research oriented. All of a sudden, there were always those guys who went to workshops and who came out in the morning to the student cafe from the plastics workshops, and I'm quite sure many of them didn't even remember who they were because they had been breathing in all kinds of fumes all night. We kind of that was of course one part of design, and of course that's how many parts of design continue. You look at furniture design; it's still very much something that you have to do in workshops and with your hands and so on. But with digital technologies, we got so many challenges that were different. They were abstract. How to capture something like how people carry things. What are the implications to product design and digital design about the fact that men usually, and boys in particular, have pockets and women carry things in their bags. And we started to get these kinds of briefs. So we went to research, and as researchers, of course, we explored the world. We went very far to the human side to see how the human side works. And then we brought our results back to the classroom, and then the design process started from that, more or less. So we brought a kind of intelligent way of doing designn into the classroom. It was different because we were working with concepts, abstractions, in some cases even theories. We didn't necessarily know those theories particularly well, but at least I didn't care, because if something helps in design, it's good. If it doesn't help, it's okay. Why should we pay attention to it? But the way of doing was very different. With COVID, what's been happening is that we went all the way to teaching through videos, examples, online concepts. So all of a sudden, design learning and doing design in the classroom in particular is builds way more on your wits and your thinking. You have to think how you do things. You have to interpret words, concepts that are not particularly good. Mm-hmm. For instance, you look at something from the more fancy end, you look at the aesthetic concepts in furniture design or ceramic design. They were usually things that you learned by doing those mock-ups, doing those whatever prototypes they were. Nowadays, you have to discuss them, and then you show something in front of a camera, and then all of a sudden you have to see how it works in this mock-up and so on. So there's lots of cognitive and conversational overload nowadays. So design all of a sudden had to become intelligent. We had been discussing this transition for already 15 years ago, and there was tremendous resistance in design schools. We still stuck to the old-fashioned way of teaching design perfectly fine. But whenever we try to go online and push more content to online books and readings and so forth, conversations in the class, without objects, there was tremendous resistance as well. It was a very slow transition. Now all of a sudden in a few weeks we had to do it.
Yes.
That's the problem that I was thinking about. What happens when design must come intelligent very quick and must start to use a different mode of operation than the previous one, which was quite successful, which has of course roots in the workshops and the worlds of the workshops, and that the roots go back over 100 years if you look at academic versions of design, and probably several hundred years, possibly thousands of years if you look at the traditional way of doing design. So that's the topic that I was interested in.
Yeah, because when I read the term intelligence, I thought maybe you could I thought maybe you could propose to speak about artificial intelligence, which is something that is also very related to what's going on and very up to date. And we are certainly starting to wonder what's the impact on design of artificial intelligence, and how soon artificial intelligence will be more intelligent than us. There are already examples of programs that design things, just to try. So that's one thing I was wondering, maybe he's going to introduce this topic. And the other thing I thought maybe the topic is about collective intelligence, because one thing I realized is that when we went through this process so fast, the community of us, of Politecnico, we all worked together, helping each other, and people were giving tips and hints on everything they learned about using Teams, about uploading programs, about doing anything. So the effort and the generosity, let's say, of sharing let us be more intelligent together, That's the other thing I thought.
Yeah, there are lots of meanings here. The final meaning is of course final meaning for intelligence, of course, in the military meaning, which is intelligence. You send the spies to another country to bring back stories and information, which has also been one of the roots, of course, for design research, especially in North America. But yeah, collective intelligence, if I look at those two meanings that you suggested, collective intelligence is definitely there. It was the same story here. Lots of sharing of examples, lots of sharing of experiences. We had lots of teachers who had already been using the web in teaching earlier. I had been doing some of my classes earlier, so that I had been putting lots of content online and even some videos and so on. And the assumption was that students can follow the learning without me being there talking. And then when I come to the classroom, we can spend the time for talking about their work, which is way more important. Yeah. So basically, flip classroom idea. And yes, there were lots of good practices. We learned that, and then we also learned that there are lots of how could I say it? Lots of bad experiences with some, especially user interfaces, because they are sometimes quite complicated, and students in particular find it difficult to find information from those platforms. Maybe it's us, we organize information in ways students don't understand anymore. So maybe our discipline has been getting too old too quick. But then there was also another track, which was like the technical track, adding lots of artificial intelligence in particular to the online environment. And there are some really useful examples there. I don't know whether you have been using Microsoft Teams and streams underneath it, and then the artificial intelligence for transcribing lectures and also for producing subtitles, which has been surprisingly good. And it just means that, again, we have to start to teach in a different way and articulate a little bit more carefully. It's probably easier for us because for you and me, because English is not our language, so we have to think more carefully anyway. And Australian English tends to lead to problems sometimes with artificial intelligence, because people speak a little bit too fast. They use slang words that American systems don't quite understand, and so on. But yeah, there has been a connection to Microsoft, lots of feedback to Microsoft, and they've been reacting to some of the issues.
Yeah.
So I must say it was better in the early times. Now with COVID, of course, Microsoft is not responsive anymore because pretty much everybody in the world must be sending them feedback about this and that.
Yes.
So there's lots of useful things.
Yes, but Teams wasn't designed for teaching, right? It was just to meet. So we had to adapt to the platform. They had to adapt to what we needed. So that's what has been happening, I guess.
Oh, absolutely. And if I look at the kind of broader implications to design about this idea of intelligence, I guess it's one of the things we have to work with in the future, and we can't just do things like, if you look at the newspapers here and in the Asia Pacific region in particular, it's all about making toilets where you don't need to touch anything. So it's adding more sensors to our environment. Is that an intelligent environment? There must be better ways to do it, and must be better ways to design as well with intelligence in mind. And that's I guess part of the problem. How are we going to work in a new way when we don't have the traditional tools of design? And that's what I've been sort of wondering lately.
Yes, and I also wonder if we keep innovating our teaching, which are the fundamentals that we still have to teach? Something must be basic, and that we expect all designers to know and skills to have, but you can't just keep adding. So what are the fundamentals? This is something I'm interested into, and maybe intelligence should be. I don't know.
Maybe. The question, I guess, is how and what's the best way to do it, because it's too easy to go into like kind of technological solutions, thinking about, we have to go to artificial intelligence, we have to start to teach people artificial intelligence and so forth. Then the question is how do we do it? It may well be that the intelligence lies in the community and the traditional ways of doing way more than in technology. The problem with artificial intelligence, as far as I can see, I have a couple of colleagues whose professorships nowadays are under artificial intelligence and design. There's Stefan Wenswen in Eindhoven and John Zimmerman at Carnegie Mellon. And when I've been talking with them, they basically tell us that the best way to bring artificial intelligence into design seems to be unremarkable. It seems to be at the low-tech end of artificial intelligence, where we can bring lots of useful things to humans. And then especially John, who's working at Carnegie Mellon, which of course is marvelously good at computer science. John tells that the way in which the true research frontiers in artificial intelligence go, they are just so much more difficult than anything he has ever seen in the design world, that it's very hard to find a way to go there. I think I saw that in maybe 2003, 2002, 2003, back in Helsinki, we were doing a little small piece of research about mobile multimedia. So we produced lots of mobile multimedia messages. We collected a few thousand messages from the web, essentially. And then, of course, one day, people in artificial intelligence in the technical university got interested in what we were doing, and they wanted to talk to us about how they could use our data. Essentially, they realized that we have lots and lots of data, and they could use it to build new types of neural networks. And that was 2002. And I think at that point, we were talking about images. I think at that point the market was using JPEG version 2. These guys were working on JPEG 6 and 7. So it was basically just mathematical equations. The difference is too high if we want to go to the kind of fancy research level things in artificial intelligence. Having said that, of course, there are probably lots of things we can do with far less technology, but rush into something simply because it's fashionable, and I'm not sure how long artificial intelligence will be fashionable, because it will face the same difficulties it has been always facing.
Yes, I think what we wonder the most is that, is it going to be able to do creative work, to be creative? No?
Yeah,
because dealing with a big amount of data is what can do at best.
yeah,
But adding the little something that we think we have as humans is what we wonder, I guess, what we might be afraid of. No?
yeah, exactly, and that's of course the classic argument that Hubert Dreyfus was doing a long time ago, and Joseph Katzenbaum were doing a long time ago in artificial intelligence. It looks like babies can talk perfectly. Babies can walk perfectly well at the age of 1.5 years. There's no robot in the world who can do what babies are doing without any problems. So there are lots of these human capabilities that we may lose if we start to believe too much in intelligence. Yeah. And of course, in the design classroom context, that's exactly the same point that all designers do. There are things you can teach by lecturing. You can learn from books, but then there are lots of things that you just have to learn in the studio.
Yes, I think, some professions already have part of their works that can be done by computers, even journalism or being a lawyer. There are programs that are able to do partially, news and set attorneys' work, the most, repetitive. So I think maybe if we have some part of a designer job which is as repetitive and easy to predict, maybe that will be integrated, I hope, not substituted by artificial intelligence. But,
oh, yes.
But hopefully we will keep, the job for ourselves.
Oh, absolutely, and we will, and there's nothing new there either. If you think about industrial design, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, a good deal of industrial design was about making models, making perfect models. Are we doing that in good design schools these days? Not really, because there are professional model makers. And in for example, when I was teaching in Hong Kong, we realized very quick that there's no need to teach making models for students, because what they do anyway is that they do their CAD models, they put them to Taobao, they bid essentially, and then in 2 or 3 days they get a print from China, and it's always way better than what we could do in a design school. So there are aspects that should go out from design as well, and when design gets more intelligence, I guess we should learn to give up things as well and not worry too much about them.
Yes. Speaking of making of models, that's one of the things I would wonder about, is being able to make something real through this process of making, of transformation. Is it a fundamental of design or not? Because you are right, you can print it digitally and don't have to deal with it anymore. Is it part of what you should learn? Is it part of a designer's basic fundamental learning, or at least at the beginning, to see their ideas becoming true by making it?
Yeah, it probably is important in a sense that the students have to understand the process, and they have to understand that there's lots of skill involved. The actual making part, I'm not quite sure. Architects have been outsourcing model making for decades, and I guess design will go there as well. So I don't really know whether we should be too worried about losing the actual skill. The important part is that you realize that when you're building things, then you can discuss lots of ideas, for example, high-level concepts like aesthetic concepts, user experience, and so on, in the context of doing. Design is not that different from acting, where you discover an expression by repeating it, rehearsing it in an ensemble. It's not something which is theoretical.
Ilpo, it was a real pleasure talking to you. Thank you to be part of this project of 24-hour conversations.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yes. So if you like, we are on for several hours still. So join us if you like. And thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, and good
Ciao.
night also to Milan.
Bye bye, Ilpo.